Hey, what's up? This is Shah. I found a cool subreddit thread on r/Jung. Let's take a look. Also, I got Mark Senpai with me.
Hello.
All right. How to be an adult. I am a 27-year-old male and I behave like a child. What can I do to be more masculine and not be a mama's boy? I can't maintain relationships. I don't want to go to work. My mother's fears ruined me and she was too controlling. There's a few comments here. One says, yeah, I would love to know how to do this. I'm 29 and I'm out codependent with my mom. She sabotages all my efforts to be independent and won't let me control my own money, LMAO. Some people are saying move out, move far away, get a job, open your own bank accounts, never speak to her again. And another one says, my suggestion is find an all-male support group, start there. This is something all guys have gone through eventually in their lives. I'm 32, so, I mean, there's a point where I moved away from my mom in terms of relationship, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in the same situation too. 32 years old. You know, kind of separated from my mom a little bit too.
Yeah.
But I still largely like, we still keep in touch pretty often. But there is a clear separation of like, me and as an adult versus like me as her son. So
I think number one is he says he's not working. And it sounds like deep down, maybe he's dealing with like some big anxiety or he just can't. I mean, he's 27, so he's probably been sitting around for a long time. Mm-hmm. And he's dealing with an anxiety of probably encountering the world, I do wonder, because the two guys on there that said they had that problem, they didn't really mention anything about dads in their lives. Mm-hmm. So the guy that's codependent on his mom or the mom controls his money and any word about the father was kind of weirdly missing from that question.
Yeah, there's a lot that's missing. There's a lot of details I'd like to know too.
So in the father thing, okay, so I guess I can kind of assume the father's not either plays a very passive role in the house, so mom is kind of domineering and makes most of the decisions, or father's not there. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they're divorced and maybe he sees the father a little bit or maybe doesn't have that much of a relationship because traditionally, I think in a Jungian sense even, or just traditionally, mom has that nurturing sort of stuff with the child. And then eventually as the son gets older, the father usually brings them out into society or, out into the proverbial wilderness to go hunting and these kinds of things and know how to deal as a man and with other men and all that kind of stuff. So I would probably recommend him to be around his father, but if the father's not there, then he's in this position where he doesn't have maybe a strong male figure that's going to look out for him, right. Or teach him these kinds of things or take the time to mentor him. Though I would say for me, because I would say getting like my first real job helped with that because then you're paying all your own bills at that point. And just inevitably, you kind of have more freedom to not listen to someone. But maybe let's say this guy has a job and then he's still unable to get away from his mother's overbearingness. I think what he would need to do is just find out what he wants. And then when his mother's desires clashes with that, he just needs to hold his ground. Mm-hmm. And then respectfully, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
just need to say, no, I'm going to do this. And then she might, throw her tantrum or whatever, or let her do that until she just realizes that I can't control that. I'll give you one specific example with my mom. My mom can be like really bubbly and happy and everyone really likes her and this kind of stuff, and which is great. Kids like her, other people like her, and she makes friends really easily. Sometimes people take advantage of her, and these can be, her own relatives, could just be friends or stuff like that. But I remember there was one instance where my mom, like there's two cousins of hers. They're my aunts, basically. We were supposed to go to a wedding. My mom's dragging me to this wedding. And okay, all right, I'll go, whatever. It makes her happy, blah, blah, blah. So I'm getting ready. We're getting ready to go to this wedding. And it's I think it was in like Lodi or Stockton. So it's about like 30-minute drive away from where we live. The aunt that's supposed to be coming, one was already there. And I'm like 25 at this time. So I went to my mom's place because we're going to drive together. So I'm waiting and I'm driving them, my mom's ready, my other aunt's there ready, and then the other aunt that's supposed to be there, so there's two aunts. The second one that wasn't answering her phone, you know, or it's not just about not answering her phone, but like she was supposed to be there at a specific time, and it's already like a half hour past that, and there's just no communication from her or anything like that. And my mom's like, no, we gotta wait. And this aunt always does stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's just her personality. And at this point, I'm getting sick of that kind of stuff. Like I don't have the patience to deal with that stuff. And I'm like, listen, she's driving here to meet us. And if she's not here on time, and if she didn't even bother or care to tell you she's going to be late, then she can drive herself the rest of the way to this wedding. And she doesn't need to park her car here and wait for us. So I usher my mom and my aunt with some resistance, you know, into the car, and we're leaving. And right as we're about to get on the freeway, which is like down the street from the house, she's like, oh, she finally calls. I'm almost there. After I think my mom or the aunt called to say we're leaving or texted her. Yeah. Then she finally decides to respond. Yeah. And I'm just like, and then she's on the phone with them. And I'm like, nope, you're going to have to drive the whole way now. And then we just went there. You know what I mean? And that was like a first real act of like, hey, you crossed a boundary with me, and you will have to pay a consequence now.
Yeah, right.
I will not bend over for you, you know, and you will not push my mom around, especially.
Yeah.
You know, I don't like that. So we got there, then we're at the table at the wedding. Then she finally shows up later. When she shows up, and she tried to give me some smart attitude, and I just immediately just got on her. And then all of a sudden they were behaving, and then she was behaving, and then being really nice to me for the rest of the wedding.
Yeah,
like, yeah, you better be. You know?
Yeah.
And then that was like a defining moment. And then another one time my mom, you know, she really makes friends, you know, and she's living in an apartment. My parents are split up, and it was like this younger couple that were like friends of relatives or family or something. And they were staying with some other people. Then all of a sudden, somehow they needed a place to stay because those other people were moving. They're like, we're only going to stay for a weekend. A weekend turned into a week, and then it turned into 2 weeks. Then it's going on like over a month.
Oh, wow.
And there's no sign of them leaving. And I like to visit my mom on like Sunday mornings, you know, because I don't know. I mean, you know, I don't see her. Like, I'll go see her on Sunday morning, and then we'll have breakfast. And then that's the time I spend with my mom, you know. And it was really getting on my nerves because I'm going to go visit my mom, and I feel like I can't have a genuine conversation with her because there's other people there. Like, it's just this weird thing. Yeah. Like, if I'm going to go visit my mom, I actually want to be able to talk to her about things.
Yeah, not get overheard.
Exactly. So then obviously people are there. I'm like, I feel like I'm policing myself. So now I'm in my mom's house, and I can't like enjoy the stuff or whatever, you know, relax.
Right.
So I'm like, hey, those people gotta go. Like, what am I doing? Like, I'm coming to this house. They're sleeping in the living room, snoring hell loudly. It's 9:00.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm like, what the heck's going on? She's like, no. Oh, don't say anything. And my mom's nervous. Like, I could just tell her liver is not built to handle this kind of a situation.
Right.
And I'm like, hey, relax. I'm gonna take care of this. I go and I wake up the guy, and his wife's sleeping right next to him. I'm like, oh no, I wake up. The wife's awake. I'm like, hey, wake up your husband. I need to talk to him.
Yeah.
So she wakes him up, and he sees me first thing.
Groggy, yeah.
And I'm like, hey, you need to be gone by Monday.
You know? It's Sunday.
Yeah. And I swear to God, they were gone by Monday. And I go visit my mom, and she's like, oh, thank God. I feel so much better, so peaceful. But there was this moment of where, like, she's begging me not to do it.
Yeah.
But I had enough sense in my mind, because I'm not dependent on my mom the same way to know, hey, no, actually, I take care of you at this point.
Right.
You don't take care of me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that, like I saw what the need was. And like that was another like defining moment of changing that relationship you have with your mom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So when it comes to stuff like that, like first of all, sadly, like he needs to find his own income. Then it's not like, hey, I'm paying for you or living with his mom, my house, my rules. And he can't put that sort of symbolic financial divide between them.
Right.
You know, and I kind of feel bad for him because I think it's leading to a lot of frustration and confidence issues, especially with women probably his own age that he wants to go in relationships with.
Right.
So it's like this huge hurdle, and he really needs to get over it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that's the best way is to start off. I mean, there's not a lot of info in terms of like what he's studying, or if he does have any sort of schooling, or if he's in the process of going to school or anything like that. But yeah, the best way is to just become financially independent, because then you can make your own decisions. You can choose, and then you have the right to say, hey, with all due respect, I make a lot of money now. He's probably
even if it's normal money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he seems like he seems like a good guy,
Yeah.
at least, and so I think he would be trying to help out, trying to like put that money back into the household for a little bit, even a little bit. So he could say within with full confidence, like, hey, I'm putting money here, so why are you telling me what to do with the with what I'm with my money, So
yeah, and I it's funny because it's like that's a problem that's wrapped up in so many things. Like it's financial, it's emotional, it's physical. Like he can get the money, and then let's say he gets that good job, but since he has this, his level of personal growth is still very attached, by the umbilical cord to his mom, metaphorically. That like, say he gets the money and he still goes out into the world. Now he's living by himself. He has this money, but his personal growth hasn't caught up with that finances. He now ends up in a relationship with a woman that takes complete advantage of him. That he's trying to use his money to do that. So it's like the money's one thing, but then that's just like one aspect. That might give you some freedom in case things go bad and like they don't want to see you anymore or something like that happens. Yeah. But then there's still this level of growth, which I think really only comes with the experience of failure.
Yep.
The only problem with this, so it's like basically he's trying to recreate himself. And the way you recreate yourself is by killing your old self, right? And we do this many times in our lives to become a newer, better version of ourselves. It's just the one caveat is to make sure in this process of killing your old self that there's not a lot of real damage.
You don't go too far.
Yeah, like he doesn't get in this relationship with this woman that like can take complete advantage because he needs experience. So he's going to have to do something for the first time.
Yeah.
And then like ends up with some woman, they have a baby, now she's gone and he's going through the divorce, and like there's a lot of just like damage associated with that. Yeah. But we want him to learn the same lesson with hopefully avoiding some of those pitfalls, Yeah. And I think there's a point that comes in every man's life where like maybe he encounters a very scary situation like that. Like you have to put yourself in a situation like that, and then you make it out, and then you're just like more of a man for that. Right. But I can't go out there and tell people to do that because that can be, dangerous.
Yeah.
So it's like, but ultimately the only thing that's going to get him from being a guy who now has his finances to being able to not get screwed in a situation with someone because he's not emotionally dependent or afraid of abandonment or something, is he has to go out into the cold world and probably fail a few times until he has like enough wherewithal and confidence in himself and enough like grit to be able to stand up for himself against others that might not even be his mom, and his mom arguably probably loves him, but the strangers out in the world might not and probably do not. And they actually don't.
Definitely not.
Yeah. So that's another aspect. You know what? That's it. I'm just going to make this a long video. There was another thread I found also from the r/Jung subreddit, and it was about rites of passage. So a rite of passage is like, in like traditional tribal culture, like just to really put it out there, it's like, and women have it too in some cultures and different ceremonies, but when a man reaches a certain age, usually they go through some kind of trial kind of put on by their community or village or tribe.
Yep.
And the completion of this trial, whatever it happens to be, then marks their transition from boyhood into manhood. Mm-hmm. I think like probably an easy example is like the Maasai warriors, or just if you just point at one, but there are equivalent things in other cultures that are more modern that we have. But one of the major problems in our current society is that there really isn't a rite of passage, so to speak. I don't know. Can you think of any?
Like common to all of us? Like, because I can think of like many religious rites of passage. There's the academic rites of passage. I mean, as you go on through your career in school, and certainly there are cultural rites of passage, but those are like they're isolated to different races and ethnicities. I mean, and even within those, they're not really formal rites of passage. Like some of them are just kind of more family based. Like for mine was, you know, when I think I was like 10 or 11. We didn't hunt the goat, but you know, sometimes what we do is we have a big party. It could be like any sort of occasion, but what they'll do is they'll get a goat, and of course, you know, Filipinos, we love goat. So and so this time around when we got this goat and I was like 10 or 11, you know, we have it in the backyard. It's tied up, and the point comes where it needs to be, you know, slaughtered. And it was my time. So I did it. And they all looked at me and said, you know, I think you should do it, you know, and so I did it. And I didn't know it at first. I mean, I didn't know what this was. Like I didn't know what the idea of a rite of passage was, but you do feel the weight of like, oh wow, like I'm doing this, and it's not just the act of doing it. It's also that like you have elders that are next to you. You have my father was there, and you have all your cousins are there, and they're all, you know, and it kind of came out of nowhere too. Like it was just one of those things where like they all are looking to you to do this. So then you kind of feel the weight of like, wow, like this is kind of nuts, you know?
Man, you know what's crazy? Something very similar happened to me.
No, wow.
This was specifically at age 12. I remember. You said yours was like 10 or
11. Yeah.
10 or 11.
Yeah.
Mine was at 12, and Pakistanis, incidentally, also love goat a lot too.
Hey, man.
But there used to be this farm, and it was the same thing, literally. Like there was a farm over there past Davis. I think he was in Dixon. Guy's name was Chuck, but he had a farm, and I'd go there with my dad, and we'd buy goats, usually around like Eid time, and my dad would slaughter goats. And I remember when I was 12, I went with my dad, and my dad had me do it.
Yeah.
And my dad was there, my brother was there, and we went out and we chose a goat, and you know, he brought it into the slaughter room and tied the 3 of its legs, and then I didn't know I was going to do it that day either.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, all right, well, yeah, so it's your time to do it. And my dad was there, my older brother was there. I think my brother had already done that by this time. And he gave me the knife, and he told me, okay, you know, put it like this, and then one clean up.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I remember I did it. I opened its throat, and blood was coming out. And then I stopped and I gave it the knife back. And I had made a mistake, actually.
Oh.
I didn't open it enough. So, okay. It wasn't enough. So Chuck had to actually, or my dad, no, I think it was Chuck, just had to open it up a little bit more. But I didn't do the full stroke properly. Like, I think I probably saw the blood start coming out, and I thought the job was done. And he explained to me, when you start it, you have to finish it.
I see.
You know what I mean? It was like this lesson that was in there about starting something and making sure you finish it.
Yeah.
You know, and especially for the animal, and that's supposed to be like the way it feels, the less pain or whatever. But I remember I didn't slaughter a goat again until I was 25, and I remembered that moment, and I was like, I better get this right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I got it right, and remember exactly how to do that now. But it was like a very defining moment in my life in terms of like, I guess you can say kind of growing up a little bit, at least at that young age.
Yeah, especially something like that. I mean, that's such a, you know, that kind of act is like so it's such a part of the human experience. You know, especially from like way back then. Like if you were out there on the fields hunting, you eventually had to be the one to finish the job. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier, like, you know, it's not really a rite of passage per se. Like it is one, but
it's not like that formal one where it's like everyone agrees this is the rite of passage, which right. does lend it more power when the entire society comes together and says this is what it is, because then everybody recognizes you from a boy to a man.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what we're left with nowadays is everyone having to individually find their own rite of passage, so internally they feel like a man versus like a societal one.
Correct. Yeah. It's like there was never ever an agreement of like, this is the one, like we're gonna meet on this day. It's just like, you know, I feel like you should do it. And I'm thankful that I got the opportunity to do that, because I don't feel like that opportunity was ever afforded to like a lot of my other cousins. Like it just happened that way. Like it just happened to be like we want him to do it, and then I was just like okay. and my experience was I wasn't able to do it by myself. I actually had someone. My dad actually had to guide my hand for a lot of it, and then kind of similar to your story is, yeah, he was just like up, you know, like once you're in there, turn the blade up and up.
Yeah.
And I did the up part, but the rest of it was like he had to like help me with like
to finish it.
Yeah, because I was afraid that like I was gonna hit the wrong place or you know, and it was crazy too because I remember like just pointing like I had the point in the neck.
Yeah.
And you kind of start to feel the resistance. Like it knows like what's happening. Like it starts kind of trying to get away a little bit.
Yeah. Those goats too, right before that, they're screaming loudly and it almost sounds human.
Yeah. It was a little traumatic, you know, like thinking about it, like, you know, from back then, but like I don't regret it. I had to do that.
You know, you saying that word traumatic, it almost makes me think that part of you almost have to be shocked out of who you are to become something else. Like, it's almost like that word trauma has such a obviously negative connotation. The way people use it, like that was traumatic. This is that, the trauma. Oh my God, poor you. But it's almost like a rite of passage takes the idea of trauma and finds some proper way to put it into a young person, to shake them up, to make them into something new.
Yeah.
So it's like that trauma is what helped develop you in this weird way.
Yeah.
You know,
it was you know, outside looking in, like it's a terrible experience, really. Like when we were thinking about, like, do I want to do it again? Like nowadays, I'd be like, oh, it's not an issue. But like for a while after that, I was like, I don't ever want to like. I didn't hold a knife for a while. Like I was like, no, I'm not cutting nothing, man. I don't want to hold anything. Like I remember that part, but I do agree. Like it had to be done. Like there was no other way to really impart the knowledge, to impart that knowledge, and also the feeling and the lessons. Like that's really the only way to do it. I think.
It has to be like this kind of experience.
Yeah, it has to be that kind of like jarring experience.
And it's like, you know, I think of like we don't have formal rites of passage. I'm trying to think of like common parlance ones, or like a vulgar rite of passage we have is like, oh, you had sex for the first time, you've become a man.
Yeah.
Or she made him a man.
Yeah, I'd say one and you mentioned it a little bit, is like the vulgar rite of passage. Maybe when you turn 21. Yeah, it's like, all right, we got to take you to the bars and get you like loaded up
or getting in your first fight. Yeah. Like your first fight as a kid, and then some people might not ever get in that fight. Now I'm not even saying you should, but that could be something like maybe you're being bullied and then your father teaches you how to defend yourself or something. And that could be almost a rite of passage. But we're talking about all these amorphous things that aren't really formalized into our culture as a true rite of passage. Right. The closest thing I could think of is maybe like military service. Like some countries have a mandatory like 2-year military service when someone turns 18. And I always think maybe that would be good for us if we had it as a mandatory thing. Yeah. Whether war or no war, I mean, I guess it depends, but maybe you go through it and maybe that helps develop you too. I think that could be one.
I think that would help. Yeah. And that could be the rite of passage that, you know, we're looking for, you know? Yeah. Because otherwise, I don't know.
It's hard. It's hard because we live in such a scientifically minded society. Like in terms of like, I mean, like empirical, rational, like, you know, it's just very like left-brained, not very symbolic. And something like a rite of passage takes a certain amount of like symbolic understanding of like putting a ritual together. Yeah. Which I guess the way I understand that, it's like it almost has religious undertones to it. Yeah. And in a society where it's like not really governed by that, people are religious, but it's like watered down, or you know what I mean? It's all a bunch of different ones. I mean, we live over here. It's a huge melting pot, but then some people aren't religious, or people are more science-minded, or whatever it is. Yeah. It's hard to kind of encode a kind of rite of passage into the society. But, you know, I don't know. When I look at a post like from that guy, I was going to read the rite of passage article. So, well, you know what? I'll read it anyways. Why not? How to create a modern day rite of passage for oneself. So this was also on the r/Jung subreddit. I like to follow that subreddit. It's pretty cool. I have been reading a lot of material on the peer lately. And I think peer eternus means like a kind of, it's almost like a Peter Pan syndrome or something, but it's a book to kind of get out of this childlike thing.
I see.
And one of the most effective tools in helping one make the transition from a life of a child into one of a responsible, independent adult is that of the rite of passage. I find most modern-day Western examples ineffective, as the tradition may be kept alive, but the effectiveness of the rite for the individual is not. This makes me wonder, what might be some modern-day examples of mimicking, so to speak, an effective rite of passage? I've heard of stories of some who might make a long trek or hike excursion that help to build one's resiliency and mental fortitude. Just wondering if anyone had some other good ideas. Thanks for these suggestions. Kind of reminds me of like people like, well, I'm going to go backpacking through Europe or something.
Mm-hmm.
And like they kind of try to give themselves a rite of passage.
Right.
Or I'm going to go traveling by myself for the first time. It's all coming from that same thing. Here's one. My son called me from a bus and told me he had left town with a backpack. He was 20, left work, school, belongings, everything. Told me he had to take a rite of passage. Hike the PCT, 2,600 mile Mexico border through Canada. He started in April, I think, finished on his 21st birthday. I hiked the last 27 miles with him. He saw a documentary about the PCT and rite of passage. Went because of this guy with the trail name Flying Fish, about it being life-changing. I think he meant trial here. My son started walking not knowing anything. Thought he'd have to quit within days due to not knowing about the desert and water supply. Stopped at a town and ran into Flying Fish. This guy from the video, this angel of a man, slowed his hike to teach my son everything. Showed him the ropes, walked most of the route with him. Rest in peace, Flying Fish. That's a hard one, but everyone needs one. Wow. Everyone does need a flying fish somewhere in their life, you know, because it's like you want to have a rite of passage, but you almost need that mentor figure to officiate the rite of passage.
Yes.
But, you know, that is just horribly missing in today's society. Here's one. Going camping by yourself for 2 weeks. And that's kind of traditional, too. Like, some rites of passages for cultures would be like they'd all go into the forest or something and wait there or whatever. You know, maybe have some vision or whatever it is. Backpacking across Yellowstone, or anything that involves you being alone in your own for a month, i.e. alone with your only a pen and paper in a cabin. What were you thinking? Anything that involves making goals and sticking to them. A lot of people have suggested travel, but even something as simple as holding yourself accountable to goals is important for a peer. To really make a point of developing discipline, vigilance, set daily, weekly, and monthly goals. So those are some of the suggestions. Again, reading all that, I don't think anyone really has the answer.
No, I don't think so either.
So, you know, unfortunately, I can't give it to you in this video either. But, well, I don't know. Let us know what you think. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment down below. If any of you guys have went through a rite of passage, maybe share it with us. I'd love to hear what it was. Or if you have any ideas of what a rite of passage could be, put it down below. I'm interested in reading it. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, this was a longer video than usual. I try to keep them below 10 minutes, but I just thought this topic was too good. So we'll see you next time.